Welcome to Lake TV's Community Spotlight Show, brought to you by the great folks at COMC, Central Ozarks Medical Center, where your health is their mission. And our guest on the show this week is Mike Waggett. Most people in the community know of Mike, but I don't think people realize, Colonel Waggett, all you did in the military before you entered into civilian life, right? How long were you in the military?
I had 24 years of a wonderful career in the United States Air Force. I was fortunate enough to be a fighter pilot for part of that time, and it did a lot of things to set me up for success after my military career as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you retired as a commander of a training center in Tennessee. I mean, you were way up there if you're the commander of a training center, right? So was it a bit of a shock going from military life to civilian life after gaining that much steam?
Yeah, it was. It took me about a month before I really started feeling like a civilian.
Right.
Yeah, and it was really neat with that last assignment. You always want command. And my boss was 500 miles away in Washington, D.C.
Oh, well,
so
the further the better,
I
right?
could really do a lot of things down there.
That's nice. And like I say, you know, I don't know if a lot of people realize how accomplished you were in the military, because you're such a humble guy, you know, and I've known you for a couple years, just as Mike, you know, and then I read your bio and it's like, holy moly, man. Do you want people not to know how accomplished you were? Because you seem to be very quiet about it.
Well, there's no reason for me to run around and tell folks that I was, you know, this fighter pilot in the Air Force. I did my service to my country. I really enjoyed it. It was time for me to move on and work with my wife in her company.
Yeah.
And a lot of the skills that came to that job with me, I learned in the military. So
yeah. Okay, so and you mentioned you work with Sandy Waggett, your wife, MSW Designs. A bit of a culture shock going from one to the other, I'm sure, but you've been, you know, very successful since making that move. So let's get back to the military, though. You were selected for, you know, becoming a fighter pilot.
Yes.
How do they make that selection? How do they choose?
Well, I went to Syracuse on a full ride scholarship to be a chemical engineer in the Air Force.
Wow.
And in between your sophomore and junior year, you go to like a boot camp for officers. It's not nearly as tough as the enlisted boot camp.
I see, yeah.
But I was very fortunate enough to come out as one of the top cadets in that experience. And with that came the opportunity to change my scholarship category. And I thought, why not give flying a shot, you know, and see if I can do something in flight school. And then I was very fortunate to get selected to a specialized pilot training program called Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training.
Okay.
And that's where pilots from NATO would come to Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas, in Wichita Falls, and we train together, fight together idea. So I trained alongside a lot of pilots from Europe, and you are automatically guaranteed to get a fighter aircraft if you make it through that training. And
really?
Very, very hard training.
Wow.
So, and I was selected to fly the F-111.
And this is the F-111 here, right?
This is the F-111, yes, sir.
Okay, so what makes the F-111 a special aircraft?
Well, this was a beast of an airplane. It was designed to fight the Soviets in case the Soviets decided to invade Western Europe. So we were stationed in England, and we could reach out and touch the Soviets without any air or fueling from our base. And it carried a massive amount of armament, about every weapon, every conventional weapon in the U.S. Air Force inventory, and also nuclear weapons, tactical nukes.
Really?
So the idea was that we would take this airplane and get beyond the front lines and go disrupt their supply line. So it was an interdiction airplane. And the way that we did that is that we flew very, very low to get under the Soviet air defenses.
Right.
And most of the missions that we would fly would be at night, and we would use terrain following radar.
Wow.
And terrain following radar, it was built by Texas Instrument. It was a thing in the nose of the airplane that beamed a radar beam out about the size of a straw.
Okay.
And so it would bounce back and tell you whether you were above an obstacle or not. And the airplane would automatically follow the
kind
terrain.
of follow the contours of the
That's right.
Wow.
That's right. Yeah, it was a pretty scary experience at the start, but you became very, very trusting in the airplane. You actually were not flying, your hands are off the controls, you were ready to take control if something went wrong.
Wow.
And as an example, the raid on Libya, that was at night, and they used terrain following radar to get in to strike Gaddafi's camp.
Okay.
And then also in Desert Storm, the first 2 weeks of the war, everybody was going in low and fast until we were able to take out all of the air defense systems that were in Iraq at the time. It was a great airplane because it was so fast.
Yeah. How fast?
It could go Mach 2.4.
Which is what?
Almost 2.5 times the speed of sound.
Okay.
That wasn't necessarily at low level, but the interesting thing about the F-111 is it's a variable wing sweep. And I had a little trombone handle right under the canopy that I could control the sweep of the wings. So as the airplane got slower, you wanted the wings forward to generate more lift.
Okay.
As you went faster, you wanted the wings to go back to reduce drag.
Wow.
And so this is the high-speed configuration here. It had two Pratt & Whitney engines that could each, in afterburner, could generate 25,000 pounds of thrust, so the 50,000 pounds of thrust total. And again, we could load it to the teeth, or we could put that really neat little nuclear bomb on.
And it could go that fast with that many armaments?
Yes. Well, no, that's clean. That kind of speed was not very tactical because you had to use afterburner.
Right.
And so that means you're burning a lot of gas. So we would normally cruise along at about 500 miles an hour.
Ah, just moping along right there. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is amazing. This is fun. It's Colonel Mike Waggett with us, MSW Designs, obviously former fighter pilot in the Air Force. We'll have more with Colonel Waggett right after this. At COMC, your health is our mission. Central Ozarks Medical Center offers 3 OBGYNs at the Osage Beach Clinic and 2 pediatricians with same-day appointments available. At COMC, our doors are open to everyone with 5 primary care locations conveniently located across the Ozarks. COMC for the best medical, dental, and behavioral health care. Get more info on how COMC can help you at centralozarks.org. COMC, where your health is our mission. If it's happening at the lake, it's happening on Lake TV. From the polar plunge to festivals, parades, aquapalooza, and boat shows, Lake TV has it all. Even the granddaddy of them all, the shootouts. If you're looking for places to party, things to do, or even a new home to move into, you've gotta love Lake TV. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, Lake TV's got it all. We think it's hot stuff when things cool down. We spring into action when things start warming up. Of course, summer is one big, huge shootout on Lake TV. And we fall in love all over again when autumn rolls around. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, Lake TV's got it all. Welcome back to Lake TV's Community Spotlight Show, brought to you by the great folks at COMC. We're talking with Colonel Mike Waggett, Air Force fighter pilot of the F-111, and you were telling us all about this amazing, I mean, it almost could go from being a regular plane to almost like a missile, you know, when you pull those wings back a little bit.
It went pretty fast, Chris.
Yeah.
It was, you didn't really feel it in the airplane, but your airspeed indicator showed you how fast you were traveling across the ground, and it was always kind of cool.
That's got to be amazing. Yeah. Okay. So, and you know, if something goes wrong, you're never going to feel it, right? I mean, it's going to be over in an instant. If you hit something at Mach 2.5 and you're that far off the ground.
Yeah. I had a personal mantra, which was, you never want to die comfortably.
Okay.
And so what that meant is you were always looking at your situational awareness, where you were, how high above the ground, what was the terrain in front of you, what was your wingman doing, what was your flight lead doing, and you never wanted to get comfortable in the airplane because things did break.
Sure.
And things did happen in the aircraft, and you wanted to be ready for them. You didn't want to die comfortably.
Did you ever have any close calls?
I did. I had several. Probably the most interesting one is I was flying as a wingman, so a flight lead here and I was here, and we were flying up into northern England to go to a bombing range to practice our bombing skills. And as the wingman, you were elected to brief the flight on the weather conditions that we could expect on the way up there.
Okay.
And I told my flight lead, I said, we want to avoid 8,000 feet because we have thunderstorms in the area, and that's where the freezing line is. That's when you finally get high enough that you're at the freezing level.
Yeah.
And the majority of lightning strikes happen 1,000 above or 1,000 below that freezing level.
Okay.
Well, where do you think we were at?
Right in the middle of
We were at 8,000 feet, and my right seater, who is called a weapons system operator, has an air-to-ground radar, but he can also use it to map out thunderstorms. And he's yelling at me, we're going right into a storm, and I'm in close formation in heavy weather. And so close formation means the wingtip is about 3 feet from the other aircraft's
You're 3 feet away from the
other aircraft's wing. And so what happened was, I saw St. Elmo's fire. His airplane started to have the green fire on it. And the next thing I know, we got smacked right in the nose with a lightning bolt. It traveled through the airplane. I was not wearing gloves, and it came into my hand and out my toes. And I had burns on my toes from where the bolt hit. And the airplane immediately pitched right. If it had pitched left, I wouldn't be here.
You'd gone right into the other plane, yeah.
Yeah, and so we rolled inverted, and all the flight control, computer-assisted flight control systems were shot. Everything electrical in the airplane was basically dead. Yeah. And so we popped out of the clouds, and I was able to roll the airplane wings level, and God was with me that day, because right off the nose of my aircraft was a British air base. And so I was able to get the gear down, threw the flaps and slats down, and was able to get it on the ground without crashing.
Wow.
So that was probably the closest that I've ever come to ejecting out of the aircraft.
How does that affect you when you come? I mean, that's a near-death experience, right? Pretty much.
It's all part of the job. You know, you train very hard to be able to handle situations that come your way. It's the really unexpected ones that can get you. Yeah. Or it's a comedy of errors where you're what they call task saturated. You're oversaturated with what's happening, and you don't do the number one thing in flying is fly the aircraft. And so that's where the majority of accidents will happen is a pilot will get distracted and then impact the ground without knowing it and things like that. So I had lots of other ones, but we only have a short amount of time.
Wow, so, which is why we have to have you back on the show, because we want to hear some of these stories. And so when we hear in the media, training accident, you know, planes go down or whatever, things like that happen, and that would have been a training accident, right?
That would have been probably pinned on my flight lead. And I'm not going to say anything more about him. We had some very heated words when I got back to the base.
I bet, yeah.
But you have human error, and then you can have mechanical error. And sometimes it's the combination of both that cause these crashes.
One of the other things that really surprised me, and we're going to have to get into this on a different show, but you're not just this fighter pilot dude, but you're also like a musician, right? I mean, you played like the viola and the guitar, you had a band, so...
I did.
So you've got this other side to you, too.
I did. I played in a band in Vegas. We were called Smoke and Mirrors. We played at several places. And then I was in the Rochester Youth Philharmonic Orchestra when I was growing up as a viola player.
Rochester, New York.
Rochester, New York.
Is why you're a Buffalo Bills fan.
I am a huge
one of the two in town, I think. You know,
Will and
William. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, are you going to be able to come back and join us on a future show?
I would love to. Okay. Absolutely.
Good. Yeah. Because there's just so much to talk about and so many wonderful stories. And we didn't even get into MSW Designs, which you are co-owner with your wife, Sandy Waggett. So that's Colonel Mike Waggett. Next time you see him on the street, don't just do what I do and go, "Hey, Mike, how you doing?" Say, "Thank you, sir, for your service. We appreciate it."
That's very nice, Chris. Thank you for having me on, and I appreciate the opportunity to tell some flying. I can always tell some flying
So much
stories,
fun,
you know.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us for Lake TV's Community Spotlight Show.